Welcome back to the Below Average Joe's MMA show. Today's video is going to be a little different because I'm going to do a little combining here. I'm going to take the recap from the PFL Playoffs heavyweight and women's flyweight card, put that with my recap for UFC Abu Dhabi. Now, as a disclaimer, I didn't get to watch start to finish every single fight on Saturday for UFC Abu Dhabi. So I'm going to touch on what I got to see, what I saw in the community, and then open it up to you guys for your comments. And that is the reason why I'm going to combine these two together just to get it all out in one video for you guys. So hopefully you enjoy it, at least for this go around. As well, the PFL happened Friday. The video is coming out, Sunday or maybe even Monday, depending on what's going on behind the scenes with the editing of this video. So for that reason, I'm going to combine them at least just this one time. So bear with me. If you don't want to hear about the PFL, you can skip ahead to the UFC recap in the timestamps in the description. Vice versa, if you just want to hear the PFL and then don't watch the UFC Abu Dhabi, that's fine too. Just watch to the halfway point. And if you want to watch the whole thing, even better. But that's what we're going to do. And we're going to start with the PFL playoffs because we now have the final matchups for the heavyweight and women's flyweight divisions. Let's get into it. The main event Friday night in Nashville, Tennessee, we saw Denis Goltsov, the 1 seed, knock out Tim Johnson 2 minutes and 26 seconds into the very first round of their fight. Denis Goltsov will now be going back to the championship for the second consecutive year, but he will look to finally get the job done and become a PFL world champion and become a millionaire. To do that, he will have to take on Oleg Popov, who also went 3-0 throughout the season. He had one finish early on and riding 2 straight decisions. On Friday, he got the decision victory over Linton Vassell. In August of 2021, we saw Denis Goltsov lose in the PFL playoffs to Ante Taila. Since then, he has went 8-1 with 7 finishes. 6 of those 7 are by knockout. And 6 of those 7 finishes have come in the first round. So Goltsov wastes no time with his opponents when he is in the cage. And again, the only loss in that time frame was in last year's heavyweight championship to Renan Ferreira, who we know is just a 6'8" behemoth. He became the champion. He's pitted to go up against Francis Ngannou at some point later on this year, since he is the reigning 2023 champ. So big things ahead for Renan Ferreira. Potentially big things ahead for Denis Goltsov. He absolutely ran through his competition this year. He ran through the competition last year. He ran through the competition in 2022. What a run that he is on. Truly one of the best heavyweights in the world right now, especially if you want to look at the activity of him and the way in which he is getting these victories. But this next one coming up for the championship could be another spoiler for Goltsov because Oleg Popov may not have the name value or the big, flashy, quick first-round finishes as Goltsov, but he has not lost a fight in years. As a matter of fact, he's on a 17-fight win streak. That loss that I just alluded to for Popov, who is the number 2 seed in the heavyweight playoffs, came in November of 2016, and he has not looked back since, rallying off an insane win streak. He's now 19-1 as a professional. 12 of his 19 victories are by finish, but he is coming off 2 straight decision wins over Davion Franklin and Linton Vassell. Now, they aren't the most exciting decisions. They aren't a barn burner by any means, but they have come relatively easy, especially this one here, this semifinal against Vassell, a Bellator former title challenger and veteran. He took Linton down 12 separate times in this bout and dominated from pillar to post. Can he do the same thing against Denis Goltsov here? Popov, a little bit on the smaller side for heavyweights as well, only coming in around 6'1". I think he weighed in the mid 240s, so that's not super light for a heavyweight, but Goltsov is a legitimate 6'5", coming in at over 250 pounds, a big, big giant man at 34 years old. He's right in his prime. Popov 31 entering, or 32, excuse me, right in his prime as well. This is a big time matchup for the PFL heavyweight championship. For Goltsov, can he finally put it all together and get that long awaited championship or will Popov play spoiler and extend his insane win streak? And now we will get into the women's flyweight championship matchup, because months ago, this is what a lot of people had predicted, and it is coming to fruition now. Dakota Ditcheva remained perfect on Friday night with another first-round finish, and she will take on the former UFC title challenger, Taila Santos. Listen, I can only go on so many more rants about how insanely talented Dakota Ditcheva is for only being 26 years old. I think she is the most elite level striker in women's mixed martial arts right now at this moment. 13-0 as a professional with 12 finishes. 11 of those 12 are by knockout. And she finally here, this was her fight to prove people wrong, because there were a lot of people, a lot of doubters coming out this week that I saw, a lot more than what I had expected. Jenna Bishop, known for her grappling, her wrestling, and her jiu-jitsu, a lot of people thought that this would be the one where Dakota would kind of showcase her weaknesses. She couldn't just keep it standing. She would get taken down. She could potentially get ground and pounded, have to fend off submissions, so on and so forth. So what do we see in the 3 minutes and 54 seconds of action that we got? Well, we did see Dakota Ditcheva get taken down. A very big takedown early on by Jenna Bishop. Defensively sound for Dakota, didn't let a lot of damage come through, didn't have to fight through any submission attempts, and then was able to work her way up to the feet, and from there it was one-way traffic. She landed nasty body work, as she always does, and in this particular sequence, while they were clinched together, she landed a disgusting Muay Thai knee to the face of Jenna Bishop that dropped her face planted to the canvas, and Dakota did not go down to the ground. She said, "Get back up," and proceeded to finish her with strikes on the feet, dropped her again for the TKO finish. Absolutely insane. She just continues to prove that fight by fight, she is getting better and better. And she is with one of, if not the best training facility in the world, American Top Team down in Florida. And you can see that at this young age of 26, how deadly she is. And she can become the face of the PFL's organization, much like PFL former champion, two-time champion, and American Top Team teammate of Dakota's, Kayla Harrison. But for Dakota to do that, she will, bar none, hands down, have to face and defeat her toughest battle to date, Taila Santos. We all know the story. June of 2022, Taila Santos, Valentina Shevchenko for the Women's UFC Flyweight Championship, a fight that went to a split decision, as close as fights can come. Many fans in the community felt Santos did enough to dethrone the then dominant champion Valentina. That is not how the judges saw it. Then she went on to lose another fight over a year later in August of 2023 to Erin Blanchfield, a loss that has aged very well. Erin, a top 5 fighter in the women's flyweight division right now, only one loss in the UFC for her, and that is against Manon Fior, who is a clear-cut number 1 contender if the UFC chooses to do so next, following the trilogy with Valentina and Alexa Grasso. But during free agency, Santos chose not to come back to the UFC, but instead signed with the Professional Fighters League, and she has tallied off a 3-0 perfect year so far, a submission victory, in April against Ilara Joanne, the first fight of the regular season, a decision win against Jenna Bishop, who Ditcheva beat on Friday night, and then on Friday in the semifinals, a decision victory against Liz Carmouche. That was relatively lackluster, not the craziest of fights, but very high level and competitive. I thought it was going to be very good, because Carmouche in the Bellator and in the PFL had gone undefeated and was on the best stretch of her entire career, even at the age of 40. But in this fight, Taila did what she had to do. She controlled the striking from a distance. She did well enough to defend herself with the grappling and with the transitioning, the takedowns, the submissions, the submission defense, so on and so forth. Taila was just a little bit ahead of Liz Carmouche. Liz wasn't able to put it all together like she had been during her win streak. And now we will pit Santos up against Dakota Ditcheva. The winner will become the women's flyweight champion and become $1 million richer for their career. The biggest fight of both of their lives. maybe you could argue that this isn't as big as the fight with Valentina Shevchenko, and I would completely understand that, right? UFC champion, it literally doesn't get bigger than that in this sport. However, PFL champion and $1 million has a nice ring to it. And this is how I feel. I think that Taila Santos and Dakota Ditcheva is one of the most highly anticipated women's mixed martial arts fights of the entire 2024 calendar. This is a fight that, again, a lot of us had predicted to take place when we saw the initial, season format for the women's flyweights and who would be competing. We had circled Taila Santos, a former UFC title challenger, and we had circled Dakota Ditcheva, an undefeated phenom who won the PFL European titles last year. And now they will finally meet in the PFL Championship for a chance to solidify their legacies in the PFL and continue moving forward into 2025 as one of the biggest names and faces in all of women's mixed martial arts. So let me know in the comments below, what do you think of the women's flyweight championship bout? Dakota Ditcheva, Taila Santos, are you excited? What are your early predictions? Because we still have a little bit to go. We have time for this fight to simmer. I want to hear all of your thoughts. Also, let me know how you feel about the heavyweight division. Will this be the year for Denis Goltsov to solidify his championship run, or will Oleg Popov extend his insane win streak and become PFL champion? And from the PFL playoff recap, we will go to UFC Abu Dhabi in the recap there, and it starts in the men's bantamweight division, a number one contender fight as confirmed by the boss man since in the aftermath. Umar Nurmagomedov, it remains perfect, gets the biggest win of his career in what was the biggest test of his career, Cory Sandhagen. Now, as I alluded to in the intro, this is where the recap could get a little more shallow because I didn't get to watch every single fight start to finish. I had work during the day. This was a daytime card. And into the evening, I was heading to a concert. So I tried to keep my phone in my face as much as it would allow me to. But from what I got to see in this fight, it was high-level MMA. And what else were we really expecting here? Regardless of if you felt this was too big of a jump for Umar Nurmagomedov to make and that you felt he was going to lose against Cory Sandhagen, you probably shouldn't have and probably didn't think that he would get dominated, that Cory would just starch him from start to finish. And that is not what we saw at all. Umar competed very well enough to get the unanimous decision victory in what was a very competitive back and forth fight in the striking department. And of course, Umar did great in the wrestling. I think 5+ takedowns, if I'm not mistaken, from the final stats. But to Cory's credit, I believe he did well in the grand scheme of things with his defense. He didn't allow for Umar to get much off while they were down on the canvas. And this is what I've just come to expect from Cory Sandhagen fights in particular. It's going to be high-level stuff, whether it's him putting on a world-class convincing performance or finish against his opponents, or even in a losing effort like this or with Petr Yan back in 2021, my favorite fight of that calendar year. He puts on fantastic performances that make you really appreciate the sport of MMA, but he didn't get the job done here. He falters and ends his 3-fight win streak. He'll have to take a step back to the drawing board and reevaluate what he wants to do next to make the title run, as he is still in his prime. And for Umar, 28 years old, now 18-0, 9 finishes, 9 decisions, and to go from the caliber of opponents that he had beaten in his first 5 UFC fights to Cory Sandhagen and get a victory, not just stay competitive, but to beat him and truly win the fight, is absolutely incredible for him. And he is next for the UFC Bantamweight Championship. He will face the winner of the Noche UFC event in September between champion Sean O'Malley and challenger Merab Dvalishvili. And honestly, either one of those matchups are so intriguing for Umar because we know Sean is the long, rangy striker that has knocked out the wrestler before, right, in Aljamain Sterling. And if Merab were to beat Sean O'Malley in September, think about that fight. Merab and Umar, two of the highest level wrestlers and grapplers in the bantamweight division, going up against one another. And if they cancel each other out, I feel like you have to lean Umar on the feet, because Umar is a little different than a lot of the people out of the Dagestan camp, like Usman Nurmagomedov, Habib Nurmagomedov. Islam, of course, has great stand-up, but Umar has really showed big evolutions with his striking and his range management that he can have on the feet, but he has the grappling to go back to at the end of the day. Him versus either one of those guys is going to be a world-class style matchup. Say what you will about Umar and his decision victories that he has, you cannot deny that he is an elite level fighter, one of the best in the world at 135 pounds, and he proved it at UFC Abu Dhabi. Give me your thoughts on that main event. Anything that you felt I may have missed from not getting to watch it start to finish, where there's some big moments that I skipped out on that I should have discussed. Do you think the fight was closer than the judges' scorecards alluded to? Do you even think maybe Cory Sandhagen should have won? Give me all your thoughts on that main event and what you think about Umar being the next number one contender at 135 pounds. Shara Magomedov stepped in on short notice to be the co-main event of UFC Abu Dhabi, and he took on Michal Oleksiejczuk. And not only did he get the victory, but he improved to a perfect 14-0 with his unanimous decision on Saturday afternoon. Oleksiejczuk entered this fight with 8 career losses, but only one of them was via knockout. Most of them, I think 6, were via submission. Shara has never submitted anyone. If you thought he was just going to go in there and knock out Oleksiejczuk, you had another thing coming. It would have taken a lot for Oleksiejczuk to get knocked out in this fight. Shara did prove to be the better man on the feet. The way that he strikes is so much fun to watch. He's precise, he's technical, he moves around. It's so slow plotting and methodically. It is really a pleasure to watch him, and he does have that sneaky power. Here, to not be able to put Oleksiejczuk away is just a credit to him and how tough he is. Again, hasn't been knocked out in years at this point in the UFC. He's lost, I think, 4 of his last 5 fights, but look at the level of competition. It's Shara Bullet, it's Kevin Holland, it's Caio Bahaio. I mean, he's losing to a lot of top 15 level guys. Michel Pereira, the other guy in that losing skid. So Oleksiejczuk is always going to be in fun fights. He has that dog in him, but the night belonged to the 30-year-old Shara Bullet, who is in his prime, who is undefeated, and more than likely will get a top 15 opponent in his next matchup. Now, I know he called for Nick Diaz. I don't think that fight is going to happen. But if we want to look at the 185-pound rankings, as I just talked about last week with another fighter entering into the top 15, I don't remember who it was. You guys may. If you don't, just go watch what my recap was for last week. But look at the back half of the top 15 and tell me you wouldn't be excited for any of these fights. Now, Chris Curtis is booked with Kevin Holland, so we can scratch him. But we have 14-ranked Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, 13-ranked Michel Pereira, 12-ranked Caio Bahaio. Hamzat is booked and busy. I'm talking about that in the rest of the podcast episode today. And at number 10, we have Roman Dolidze. Any one of those matchups makes sense and is a interesting stylistic clash for Shara Bullet. Sign me up for any of them. How about the former flyweight champion turned 3-0 bantamweight Deiveson Figueiredo? He has extended his 135-pound winning streak, wins over Rob Font, a submission over Cody Garbrandt, and now a decision victory over Marlon Chito Vera, former title challenger. What a victory for the 36-year-old out of Brazil. Deiveson Figueiredo has proved to fill out very well in this bantamweight weight class, and now he is 1 win away from getting a title shot in a second division. Round 1 of this fight, we saw Deiveson utilize more grappling than we've really seen him use in his entire career. Yes, he submitted Cody, but it was 4 minutes into the second round. It was weird. They kind of struck for most of that fight. This one, that entire 5 minutes was Deiveson shooting for takedowns, getting them. Marlon would be able to get back up. Deiveson would take him down again. Really was pressing forward with that grappling, taking a different approach to this fight. Round 2, I felt that Marlon Vera started to come back a little bit. We know he is historically a slow starter, Chito Vera. And in round 3, I thought it was very competitive. Could have went either way, but I felt a clear 2-1 was the right call for Deiveson Figueiredo. A great fight, a very enjoyable fight to watch in my opinion, and a huge win for Figgy. Again, going to be 1 win away from title contention. You could maybe even argue that you feel he is a more deserving number 1 contender than Umar Nurmagomedov. Maybe you feel that that's just the fight that should happen next is Deiveson versus Umar Nurmagomedov, but the boss man Dana White said Umar's next. You got to take him at his word, which leaves us with the rest of the top 5 in the bantamweight division. Who could Deiveson Figueiredo fight? We have the perfect choice. That is former interim champion and undisputed champion, as a matter of fact. It's been so many years ago now. Petr Yan. We saw Petr Yan end his 3-fight losing streak back in March at UFC 299 with a very good fight and decision victory over top 10 opponent Song Yadong. Now, let's put him up against Deiveson Figueiredo, a former bantamweight champion, a former flyweight champion. Lock him in the cage. The winner is the next number 1 contender for the 135-pound title fight. Come on. It doesn't get easier than that if you're the UFC. 8 losses in a row. The new UFC record, unfortunately, it is held now by Tony El Cucuy Ferguson. He gets submitted 3 minutes and 44 seconds into the first round of his fight up at welterweight against former lightweight Michael Chiesa. Michael Chiesa, on the other hand, ends a 3-fight losing streak in his own right and really needed this for his career. I believe he's 36, but still has hopes to climb, and have some competitive fights in the back half of that welterweight division. I believe I heard him say in a podcast that he kind of realizes that the title may not be in the foreseeable future, and he wants to have fun fights, whether it's at welterweight, whether it's up another weight class at middleweight. I always have respected Michael Chiesa, especially over these last few years. Good for him to get back into the win column, end his skid. It just sucks that it had to come at the detriment of Tony Ferguson. And Tony Ferguson had the most Tony Ferguson retirement that you could imagine. He did give a very heartfelt speech, appreciated the fans out in Abu Dhabi, everyone that has supported him. He said he wants to go nowhere else but the UFC. And so for that reason, he's going to lay one glove down in the octagon for retirement, but keep one to himself in case he changes his mind. Beautiful thing, I thought. I felt that it was very Tony Ferguson, and they gave him that moment. But then what does he do? I see the UFC post another video 5 minutes later as he's walking to the back. The one glove that he kept, he threw into the fans and said that he's ready to go again. He still has more to improve on. The UFC said in their tweet that Tony Ferguson has more left in the tank or something like that. Even though Dana White, the CEO of the UFC, has said he's not interested in Tony fighting past this fight here. I don't know what's going on. Maybe a little meeting happened with Dana and the social media coordinators and managers after that tweet was put out. I don't need to see Tony Ferguson fight again. I think we're all in agreement with that. It sucks that we had to see him go out again, get finished again. But I did feel that moment in the octagon would have been perfect. And then we saw what happened with him saying he wants to go again. We'll see what happens. I don't see how it can be justified. The UFC give him another crack, another fight. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he even talks him into it, throws some sand in Dana's face, and signs the contract while Dana's washing his eyes out.
That's fucking illegal.
Another losing streak was snapped in the women's strawweight division. This time, Mackenzie Dern ends her 2-fight skid, stays in the top 10 with her victory over Loopy Godinez. I knew this fight was going to be exactly what it was. A grinded out, just dog fight. We have two people that are grapplers to their core. Mackenzie Dern, a world champion jiu-jitsu artist. Loopy Godinez, a great wrestler for this 115-pound division. They canceled each other out. Loopy did not want to wrestle and risk the jiu-jitsu of Dern, and Dern has never been known for her takedowns to begin with, and if she was going to shoot takedowns against Loopy, they more than likely would have been stuffed. For that reason, we see them strike for 15 minutes. I believe in the first round there was a couple of minutes there where Mackenzie held top control, had full mount, was looking at locking in an armbar at one point. Outside of that, we saw a lot of in-the-pocket boxing, up against the fence, dirty striking. Pretty good fight all in all, pretty competitive, but Mackenzie definitely did enough to get the victory. So she will hold her spot, but unfortunately now for Loopy Godinez, she's the one on a losing streak, having lost to Virna Jandiroba earlier this year, who is now the number 1 contender, if you ask me, in here against Mackenzie Dern. So she will take a step back, probably fight someone on the outside looking in of the rankings, or maybe the very back half of the division. And for Mackenzie, she's been fighting some of the best women in the world the past couple of years. She had lost 4 of her last 6 fights heading into this. So this was a very, very big victory for her career. It's just a matter now of what do we do with the matchups, because so many people ranked ahead of her would just become a rematch. So maybe if you give Virna Jandiroba the title shot against Zhang Wei Li, you can do Tatiana Suarez and Mackenzie Dern. That's the fight that I would like. I want Suarez to get one more in at 115 before she gets the crack at the title. Virna is on a 4-fight win streak, just finished Amanda Lemos. I think that's what you do. You do that title fight, Zhang Wei Li, Virna Jandiroba. Then you do a number one contender fight, Tatiana Suarez and Mackenzie Dern. Joel Alvarez has got to be one of the most fun fighters to watch at lightweight, right? Surely you didn't say no to that question. The man is 21-3. All 21 victories are by finish. He's went to a decision one time in his 24-fight career. Look at this stretch that he is on. He has won 6 of his last 7 fights. His only 2 losses in the UFC, his debut in 2019, Damir Ismagulov, a fight that went the distance, and his only other loss, Arman Tsarukyan in 2022. We know just how damn good Arman Tsarukyan is now. He's the number one contender waiting in the wings to face Islam Makhachev. Everyone else has fallen short, quite literally, to Joel Alvarez, because let us not forget, he's like 6'3", the biggest lightweight on the roster, I think, paired with Jalen Turner. So how fitting would it be for him to get matched up with Jalen Turner, the Tarantula versus Joel Alvarez, the 2 tallest lightweights in the division, long and rangy, known for their finishes. I believe that Jalen Turner also has a 100% finish rate, if I'm not mistaken. That is excitement to another level. Jalen can hold his spot, look to move forward with a victory over Joel, who's been in the rankings before, and Joel can crack back into the rankings if he beats Jalen Turner. We've got to start talking more about Azamat Murzakanov in the light heavyweight division, because the man is now 14-0 with 11 finishes. He is 4-0 in the UFC. 3 of those victories are by stoppage. He just knocked out the number 15 ranked Alonzo Minifield on Saturday. I think it would be a good idea to have him match up against someone like a Johnny Walker, who's on a little bit of a skid right now, could use a big victory over someone like Azamat, an undefeated guy, to get his kind of career back on the right spot. And obviously it would be a huge win if Azamat could beat someone with a name value of Johnny Walker. Otherwise, you got to start looking at like Anthony Smith or Bogdan Guskov, maybe Dominic Reyes. Any mixture of those 4 would be fine. But I think Johnny Walker, someone who's kind of teetering back toward the back half of the top 15, doesn't have a lot of momentum, would make the most sense here. Azamat Murzakanov is dangerous. The problem is he's 35, so time isn't necessarily on his side, but he's in the light heavyweight division, so you can go a little bit later into your career when you're up a weight class. Either way, he's dangerous, and he's here to stay in the 205-pound rankings. And lastly, I want to touch on Cowie Fernandez, who got his first UFC victory and chopped down the leg of Muhammad Yahya before finishing him with strikes 4 minutes and 45 seconds into the first round. He debuted in November of last year against Mark Jacasey, someone who had a ton of experience in the UFC prior to that. And before his UFC debut, he's from Shudo, Brazil. He fought in LFA numerous times. He has good names and competition for a regional scene type of fighter. At 29 years old, he's 9-2 with 7 finishes. Someone to keep your eyes on in the lightweight division, but he had to first get that first UFC victory, and that is exactly what he did here. Not only a win, but a big-time dominant finish. So give me all of your thoughts on UFC Abu Dhabi. What do you think of Umar Nurmagomedov being the number 1 contender as confirmed by Dana White? Do you think it should be Deiveson Figueiredo instead? Let me know what you think of the 135-pound title picture right now and your biggest takeaways from the rest of this card. If you enjoyed this recap of both the PFL and the UFC put together, be sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new, where I recap every single week the most meaningful results from every card. I also break down the biggest storylines and what is at stake heading in to every fight card each week, and I give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can join the community on social media at the BAJ MMA and follow along on your favorite audio platform if you like podcast episodes. They release every Friday and Monday, and there's content on there that doesn't make it to YouTube sometimes, and vice versa. Have a great week, and I will see you in the next video.